Alright, sup everybody, welcome back to the Path of Rage and our ongoing Star Citizen coverage here on Tuesdays. We got a bit to go over, some changes to the Evocati news, an update on server meshing, which we finally got to test out, and what I can and can't talk about with it being Evocati. And we also got on Inside Star Citizen this week a very in-depth look at the current status of the Idris. Now that players have been able to get a hold of it with the current event that went on where the devs were piloting one and people were able to see the inside of it a bit more. The devs have gone over it in a bit more detail and the thinking behind the way they built the ship and all that. All of that and more we're going to get into in this episode. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get stuck in. So first things first, we're going to get into the juiciest bit about this, and that's the changes to the Evocati NDA that we had to sign, and the current, or pardon me, not current, the recent test of server meshing in the Evocati on the Tech Preview channel. The changes to the Evocati NDA mean that we are now allowed to talk about the patches themselves and our experiences in them, how they went, what we were finding in that build, etc. We're just not allowed to show you video or screenshots of those tests. But again, we can actually talk about them. So I thought I would share my thoughts with you of the recent Evocati test on server meshing. Last week, the Evocati were able to jump into either the Stanton system or to Pyro, which had been fully unlocked at this point. We were able to go everywhere in the system, unlike the previous Tech Preview that people were able to join. We were able to check out all the locations and whatnot, do what you had to do. From the gameplay perspective, from the player's perspective, there really wasn't much to see. The game ran as it normally runs. Missions were not working in Pyro system. They were in Stanton. There were various bugs. For one, I saw that if you logged out in a bed in Pyro, there was a good chance that you would log back in and be in the Stanton system, or you would take missions in the Stanton system even though you were in the Pyro system, and you couldn't change between the two systems because of a bug that would absolutely crash the server that they knew about. They didn't want that being reproduced, so they shut off the ability to travel through the jump points between Stanton and Pyro. We had full servers. There were, when I was on at the one point, there were 50 people in both systems at the same time. I did not experience any massive problems flying around Pyro. Again, from my perspective, the player's perspective, everything was actually running very, very smoothly. Minor bugs, you know, like the NPC suddenly T-posing or whatnot, things that you're used to. Nothing particularly egregious because of the server meshing test. However, one of the servers, or both I believe, did crash just before I logged in. Now when this was happening, I was monitoring both the in-game chat, where the Evocati were, but also the Spectrum Evocati chat board as well. And between the two, we were all sharing the bugs that we were finding and our experiences with the server meshing. As I said, just before I came onto the server, apparently it had crashed. And what people were reporting in both chats was that the server went down. Most of them got stuck where they were without being able to move for various lengths of time. I think it took up to a couple of minutes, if I remember correctly. But immediately after that, the server started up again, the way meshing is supposed to work, or another one took over, and most of the Evocati that were on the servers in both systems picked up where they left off. In their ships, flying in the same direction. Some people didn't even lose their quantum travel routes. Other people did. They came back, they loaded back in, and they were floating in space, their ship nowhere to be seen. So it wasn't perfect, but overall it was a success by the looks of it. The server went down, actually crashed. People were not kicked to the main menu. It hung for a bit, and then the server picked up again and carried on for the most part uninterrupted from where it crashed. This is a huge milestone for Star Citizen. Server meshing is, as I've said in previous videos, one of those, if not the most important technology that Star Citizen needs to achieve its goal of one giant living shared world with all the players in it, you know, 9 or 10 NPCs to every player to make the living, breathing world. These servers being able to spin up and as needed and on the fly and saving everything where it is and picking up where it left off thanks to meshing and the replication layer. This is absolutely a crucial technology, and to see that this test went overall very well, by the looks of it, is quite a good thing to see, I think. I'm sure we'll hear more from CIG about this in the coming weeks, how these tests are going, because these tests are for them to draw on a lot of background data, stuff that's going on outside of the player's view, things that make the game run in the background. So hopefully we see more of them. There's no mention yet that I've seen about when the next test will be, but I have to imagine that they'll start to come on a lot more regular basis, just because this is a technology that they need to get out there into players' hands and testing hands to get it finalized, get it working properly, and I can't wait to see more. On to the Idris walkthrough. So in Inside Star Citizen, the developers went over the processes behind building the ship and how it influenced development of other ships and whatnot. Let's get into that. They were saying that the exterior has gone through several iterations over time while keeping the overall original concept shape of the ship in order to fit the interior within that concept shape. Development of Squadron 42 meant that the ship got a bit thicker overall height-wise and is now very densely packed. The hangar inside the ship can fit up to 3 Gladius-size ships, light fighters, with ships being able to enter the hangar from both the front and the back of the ship. The decks have been broken up with different elevations, even within the same deck, with the layouts being fairly symmetrical. For example, exits from the hangar are at a lower elevation than the flight deck itself, with the pilot ready room being slightly above it. The ship itself was designed from the inside out, with the devs pointing out that the interior is king when it comes to attention to detail, simply because of how much time you spend inside the ship, up close and personal with the assets in the ship, than you do on the exterior. Once the interior was laid out and finalized, then the exterior skin was sculpted around it. And I have to say, look at the layout of this ship, the interior. Like, look how intricate this is. And considering the size of this ship in the game, how big it actually is, this ship alone is bigger than a huge number of FPS levels in any other game you might want to think of. Aside from maybe open world map. There's a separate hangar as well on the bottom of the ship for the cargo MPUV, which coolly hangs from the ceiling, and the door for it is in the floor. Vehicle art director John Crew said that he had seen many people fall out of this hangar door in atmosphere, and given Star Citizen's lack of anything resembling a parachute, I would say that this is not an advisable area to stand on. They also showed this little clip of them coming out with the MPUV as if it's the dropship from Aliens, which I think is... The gravity generator room here had actually been in another section of the ship entirely, and up near the top, I believe they said, with its layout and its looks based on similar real-world facilities to look like what players would expect a gravity generator room to look like, you know, a highly industrialized area. This reminds me of videos that we can see now of current fusion reactor tests. So I think they hit the mark here. The entire room also closes up into a closed cylinder that players can come and go from, adding to the realistic feel of it. Aside from very specific areas such as turrets or the gravity room and the briefing room, there are no dead ends in the Idris. The devs said that you are constantly flowing through the ship as you move within it. This is because a lot of the ship's interior was focused on multiplayer combat, and having pathing options in multiplayer maps can really make or break how good it feels to play. The devs said that there are at least 2 options for traversal for every corridor, for every room, etc. throughout the ship. And the ship also has a lot of decks. The Idris has the air traffic control room, which unsurprisingly overlooks the hangar. There's the MPUV subdeck, the main deck, which has the mess hall and sleeping quarters, for example. The mess hall and the sleeping quarters are located in the heart of the main deck, and the sleeping quarters both have a larger common bed area with bunks that close up for privacy for the regular crew, and 2 private cabins for the pilots, with the captain and the first officer also having their own larger private cabins. CIG also pointed out that not all areas of the ship are complete, with the missile room being an example. Players were unable to access this in the current event. It was closed off and shut down. That is because the work is not quite done on the ship yet. It's still being finalized out as work for Squadron wraps up. Large parts of the ship and the Aegis ship line in general take a lot of inspiration from 80s sci-fi movies that influence the use of shape and material composition and how the ship looks overall, what makes a habitation area look inviting compared to the engineering section, for example. Since the Idris is a capital ship, it kind of has to cover all those bases to be a believable looking functional spaceship. The Idris is also very modular in design, with many elements being shared among the Aegis ships. Since the Idris is the first capital ship CIG worked on, it influenced the way the modularity for ships work in the game overall. Taking a look at the various areas of the Idris, players will see assets from the engineering, technology, habitation, or medical areas that have been carried over to other ships and similar areas of the verse, as these areas again served as the first kind of style guides for these areas and areas on ships as well to follow. The Hammerhead is a good example of this, as it uses a fair bit of the Idris asset kits as well. The devs said that they also tried to avoid too many right angles in the ship to help with that feel of flowing through it, and care was taken to have a lot of viewing ports and windows that players can look through to other parts of the ship, making it feel all that much more real. They mentioned that navigating the interior of the ship has been somewhat of an issue at times, where things could look samey. So the ship will be receiving a seriously large injection of color apparently in the future, helping players to more easily understand where they are going in the ship, if they're going forward or aft, or left or right sides of the ship. Now, I gotta admit, the footage that you're seeing in the background here looks awesome to me. I think the Idris looks fantastic. But they did say that as it is, it's completely undressed, bare bones even, in these shots, and that there are normally tens of thousands of entities on top of all this that make it feel lived in and inhabited. CIG used the example of seeing it filled with NPCs, going about their duties on the ship, such as technicians working on ducts and the janitor mopping the floor and whatnot. It goes a long way to helping the ship feel lived in and more immersive. They showed off a gym and exercise room, which was once the pilot ready area, but this was changed when they moved the ready room down to the hangar, as CIG felt it made more sense for pilots to get ready on the same deck as their ships, not 2 levels up and a couple flights of stairs. There are 2 crossover points overlooking the hangar for players to cross to the other side of the ship, a large brig where players can lock up their bounties and criminals. There is a security office, larger shared escape pods, and these clearly marked red areas that will be airlocks and maintenance areas. The briefing room, which is going to play a huge part in Squadron 42. There's also an armory complete with a firing range on the Idris, which led to CIG having to figure out what to do about players trying to leave the range with their guns, as you can't exactly walk around a military ship carrying a gun in your hand. Above the rear of the hangar is a cargo area with an elevator on either side that drops down to the hangar itself, giving players the ability to transfer and store cargo a little bit better. They could bring the cargo in at the back, put them up in the cargo area on these lifts, and also bring it back down to put it on another cargo ship that has to leave, helping to speed along the process now that cargo is going to be a manual process for it. When it came to the engine room, it was designed to resemble places like the Hadron Collider at CERN and nuclear power plants, to give it that high-tech industrial look that players would expect in an engine room. The ship has wall component panels all over the ship itself to provide redundancy to damaged systems, allowing the ship to continue functioning even when sections of it are brought down. This apparently even goes as far as bulkheads that will close automatically if a section of the ship, loses atmosphere, for example. And because the ship was designed with combat in mind, certain sections of the ship will be very hard to take in boarding actions. The engineering or bridge sections, for example, will be very easy to defend against intruders. And while there is that flow to the layout we talked about previously in this video, there's still going to be definite choke points for players to slug it out at. One of the devs kind of likened it to the Titan mode in previous Battlefield games, which, for anybody who played that, that's where you boarded an aircraft carrier and tried to take it over and go to the bridge. That was an extremely fun game mode in Battlefield 4, or in the Battlefield series, and the idea of capital ship boarding in Star Citizen playing out in a similar manner is actually really exciting in my mind. And finally, the bridge can be accessed by the elevator at the back section of it, and there's also a staircase on either side. And the entire area saw several iterations in order to provide good visibility and layout while on the bridge, while also still feeling chunky and weighty, like a capital class should. The struts in the windows and whatnot are not small and feeble and thin looking. They look like something that's designed to go into combat while still providing a nice view and a nice looking area and play space for players to get into. And there you have it, folks. That is the update for this week. A little bit smaller. There was no Star Citizen Live this week, and we're waiting for monthly report at the end of this month. But for now, we have tested server meshing for the first time on the Evocati with what seems to be a fairly successful test, and we've now gotten a look at an absolutely fantastic capital ship in the Idris, ship we're going to spend a lot of time in when we play Squadron 42. I am getting very excited for this year and Star Citizen's future. I hope you guys are. I hope you'll stick around with this channel as we find out just where this game is finally going to go. Until next time, I've been Rage8 Games. I will see you in the verse.